Okay, hello everyone. I am joined today with Ethy. He runs the YouTube channel Ethy, and it's spelled Ethy, and I'll link your channel in the description after the debate. Now, we are debating whether or not it is ethical to kill slaughterhouse workers in order to free animals. It's a pretty crazy position to hold. So, why don't you start off? Give us your side of the story.
Okay, well, here's my thing. So, since killing slaughterhouse workers would publicize veganism and expose it to the masses, it would turn more people vegan and reduce animal and human suffering through the killing of people who I'd consider worthy of death. So, my criteria for being worthy of death is if you can physically violate a sentient being's basic rights. Um, to the point where if killing you would reduce needless animal and human suffering, it then becomes ethical to murder you. So this does not apply to just someone who eats meat and couldn't and doesn't match this criteria. It only applies to people who could and are not indoctrinated to the point where they think it's okay to pay for animal abuse but not actually do it. So that makes sense.
Okay, wait. Explain the criteria again because it's a little murky. So
Okay.
you're saying if somebody eats meat but doesn't fully understand like the far-reaching consequences of what they're doing, they don't deserve to be killed?
If they wouldn't do it themselves, they don't deserve to be killed.
But if they would do it themselves, they do deserve to be killed.
Yes, if killing them reduces animal and human suffering. So you could be a sociopath, and if you're vegan, then I don't think it's ethical to kill you.
Okay, so hunters would fall under that category then, that
Yes.
you should kill hunters. Okay,
Well, it's ethical. I'm not saying that like you should, like you'd need to. I'm just saying it's ethical.
you're just saying it's ethical. So you're not necessarily promoting killing slaughterhouse workers. You're just saying it would be
Well, in a way I am because it would reduce animal and human suffering, and I'm fine with that being the price to pay to reduce it.
okay. So there's several issues here, and I guess we can talk about both the principled issues and the practical issues. You brought up that it would reduce both human and animal suffering. I'm not so sure about that because you're killing people, so I don't think you're actually reducing both human and animal suffering by murdering people. Two, you mentioned that it would expose veganism to a lot more people, and more people would turn vegan as a result. I don't think murdering people would make people want to turn vegan. And the thing is, this is literally the definition of terrorism. It's no different than Islamic terrorism. It literally is no different than Islamic terrorism. You're murdering people for political reasons, and it just makes as little sense as claiming, oh, well, if the Muslim Brotherhood starts murdering people, that will expose Islam to more of the world and more people will turn to Islam. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Well, no, here's the point. I don't think that people would go vegan just because like oh, he killed slaughterhouse workers. That's fucking cool. I think that it would expose veganism because it would make veganism more of a controversial topic. If someone walked into a slaughterhouse and shot up slaughterhouse workers, don't you think that that would become a pretty popular news story? Like things would pick up on it. More people would be exposed to veganism, more people would turn vegan, and that would reduce animal and human suffering, point blank period.
Okay, I don't get how murdering people would like make people want to go vegan. Like if they see a news story, vegan like murders 20 people in a slaughterhouse. I don't see how that would be a positive message that would make people want to go vegan.
Well, I think if they can think for themselves, I think if they disagree with that, they obviously know, like not all vegans think that. But like I'm just
Well,
saying
you're kind of promoting this as some sort of ethical belief that's a part of veganism.
I'm not saying it has to be a part of veganism.
Yeah, but you're kind of promoting this ethical belief as if it is part of veganism.
Well, it reduces animal and human suffering like veganism because it would turn more people vegan because more people would be exposed to veganism than if it didn't happen. Without the news story, less people would be exposed to just the word vegan even.
Okay, there have been a few vegans who've killed people. I think there was some vegan chef that might have even had his own TV show. He ended up killing his wife. There was the crazy Iranian woman who shot up YouTube headquarters. She didn't end up actually killing anybody. She just wounded a few people. She just shot them with a handgun. Um, do you think these actions actually make more people vegan?
No, they didn't actually shoot up people who I'd consider worthy of death, and
Well, does
slaughterhouse
it
workers are worthy of death.
well,
And
that's not the thing though. Like you even said yourself, like murdering slaughterhouse workers in and of itself won't help turn people vegan. The point is to have this publicized in the news, and when more people hear about veganism, chances are more people will go vegan. But I'm saying, like, when these news stories go on air, a vegan kills his wife, or vegan shoots up YouTube headquarters, wounds 5 people, do you really think that's actually helping to turn more people vegan?
no, because I think it's only publicizing it is only a justification when you're killing someone who's worthy of death. If you're killing someone who's not worthy of death, I don't support it. It's not ethical.
Okay, so if you're saying if people hear on the news slaughterhouse workers were murdered or hunters were murdered by vegans, that is what would ultimately help people turn vegan, not just that they're hearing vegans are killing people.
Yes. Well, if they just hear that vegans are just killing random people, like, I understand why you'd think that's crazy, but you're literally killing someone who's causing very needless suffering and death, and the world would just be a lot better place without them, and it would reduce animal and human suffering because more people would go vegan.
Okay, again, this is literally no different than terrorism. You have to actually get people on your side. Like people actually have to agree with what you're doing to find this attractive. So, like ISIS, the Muslim Brotherhood, other like crazy extremist Muslim, organizations, if they go out and like commit a suicide bombing, kill a bunch of Jews at a shopping mall or infidels or whatever, um, they think what they're doing is 100% justified. Like according to their religion, they're murdering people who don't deserve to live according to Islam. Now, that doesn't mean when people see that on the news, they'll say, oh, well, those people deserve to die. Islam is the right religion, so I'm going to move to Islam. Like, it's the same kind of situation. You
No,
can't just expect people like to see these news stories and say, oh, vegan killed slaughterhouse workers. Well, slaughterhouse workers do deserve to die, so I guess I'm going to go vegan.
well, I think you can damn well, justify killing slaughterhouse workers a lot more than you can justify killing just random Jews. Because
Uh,
slaughterhouse workers, I actually fit the criteria of being worthy of death.
well, I'm sure it would be easier to justify it, but that doesn't actually matter. Again, this has to go along with popular opinion. It's not popular opinion that people should be murdered just because you disagree with their line of occupation.
It's not that I disagree with their line of occupation, I disagree with what they're doing, and if killing a piece of shit person reduces animal and human suffering, then that's a price that's, I'm willing to pay, makes it ethical.
Okay, what I notice here is you're kind of skipping between principled argument and the practical argument. You kind of have a consequentialist approach here where because it would ultimately reduce both human and animal suffering, the consequence of murdering slaughterhouse workers is preferable to letting them live because ultimately it would cause more overall suffering. But you also kind of switch between the consequentialist position and the like a principled position where you'd only kill people who are aware of what they're doing and actually support animal suffering and death directly. So slaughterhouse workers and hunters. So you don't see that as kind of a little bit of a contradiction there, where on one hand, you're going with a consequentialist position where if we can kill people and the overall consequence is benefits both humanity and animals, then that killing is justified. But at the same time, you're kind of picking and choosing who you're going to kill based on the principle that people who are willingly supporting like suffering and death directly, like hunters and slaughterhouse workers, only they should be killed.
Well, that's basically because of indoctrination. If you don't fit my criteria and you're a meat eater, there's obviously some indoctrination. I don't think you should be killed just because you didn't choose to be indoctrinated. Slaughterhouse workers choose to kill these animals. They choose to be pieces of shit people, and that's why it's justified to kill them.
Okay, well, you could just argue that they're a little more indoctrinated than other people are. There are, in fact, slaughterhouse workers who've gone vegan after working in a slaughterhouse.
Well, once you're indoctrinated to that point, I still think it's ethical to murder you. If you're only indoctrinated to the point where you think it's okay to support animal suffering, but you wouldn't do it yourself, then at that point, I don't think you should get murdered.
Okay, but if it would actually reduce the overall suffering and death for both humans and animals, wouldn't the consequence justify it?
No, it only justifies it when it's someone who I deem worthy of death because of this criteria that I listed.
Okay. I still don't I still don't understand how you make a hard line there, especially since you could just easily argue that slaughterhouse workers or hunters are just at a higher level of indoctrination. And again, there are hunters who have gone vegan. There's actually a guy on Facebook who, after like just a fishing trip, he realized, holy shit, I'm like torturing these fish, and he went vegan. This sort of thing does happen. There was even a dairy farmer who went vegan, and he turned his like cattle ranch into an animal sanctuary. Like this sort of stuff happens. If you're going to say, well, these people are only doing it due to indoctrination, and I'm going to spare their lives, then shouldn't you also do that to everyone else? Because like literally everyone else is just indoctrinated into this culture and lifestyle. So shouldn't you give them a chance to like look at the ethical side and go vegan?
Well, yes, and a lot of them wouldn't be exposed to the ethical side if a new story like this didn't come out. So, and I seriously question the likelihood of slaughterhouse workers going vegan or hunters going vegan because a lot of them, there's no way in hell they'd ever do that.
Um, what's his name? Rob Ford, the premier of Ontario. He's actually vegetarian because he worked in a slaughterhouse. So
Okay.
this sort of stuff does happen. It might be a low likelihood, but this does actually happen quite frequently.
Okay, well, again, like the low likelihood is why I still think it's justified. That's one of the factors too.
Okay, that's kind of interesting because I saw a video you made where you said you were basically suggesting that it's unethical to pull the plug on somebody who's in a coma
No,
if
I was
there was a
asking a
chance they'd.
question.
Oh, you were asking a question. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm still not understanding how. Like, let's say I'm a cattle rancher. Like, I own a beef farm basically, and I'm just watching the news one day, and I hear that a vegan got a machine gun, shot up like a slaughterhouse, killed a bunch of people. How's that going to help me as a cattle rancher to go vegan?
Well, hopefully it'll scare you to not do it anymore because you're gonna be scared of getting shot.
Okay, well, that's not actually going vegan though. and that's another thing. Like this is terrorism. I mean, the government could crack down on any sort of crime or something that they find unethical or is bad for the peace. Like, what if there's an issue with drugs, like illegal drug market? Should the government just be able to shoot every drug dealer that they see, and then that'll scare the shit out of anybody who is selling drugs? Like, again, should we be promoting these sorts of policies? If somebody doesn't do something, or if somebody does something I don't like, then that means I can just shoot and kill them. And hopefully, everybody else who's considering and doing that thing just gets scared shitless to not do it. Is that like the sort of society we want to live in?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if they're worthy of death, then yes. And I don't think drug dealers are worthy of death. I think you're only worthy of death if you match this
Okay.
criteria.
Well, who gets to decide who's worthy of death or not?
Well, it's basically a subjective type thing. Like you can't just
Yeah.
objectively make like all laws.
Yeah, and that's a huge fucking problem because you're talking about murdering people just based off of your own subjective moral standards.
Yeah,
Like,
and we throw people in prison because of our subjective standards too. And
yeah,
that's a
but
society I do want to live in.
But the difference is you're not murdering people and you actually give them some sort of chance at a trial. They can hire a lawyer, they can have a legal defense, and even if they fail at their legal defense, they're still only going to be in prison for a number of years and they'll be out eventually. If
Well,
you
not if they
murder
murder
somebody who
somebody.
does some, well, if you murder somebody who doesn't do something that you like, then that's it. They're just dead.
Okay, and until until the government actually cracks down and throws them in prison, it will be ethical because it does reduce animal and human suffering and they are worthy of death and nothing else is going to happen to them if they don't get murdered basically.
Okay, I could say drug dealers are worthy of death because they promote human suffering and death, especially now that fentanyl has made its way into, normal street drugs. People are putting fentanyl in cocaine and heroin, and people are overdosing and dying from it. So it's okay to kill drug dealers because they're causing human suffering and death.
Well, I'd say that's kind of an absurd claim and I think that
How is that absurd? Well, that is just a demonstrable fact, especially hard drugs like cocaine and
oh no,
heroin.
I agree about that.
So, so
I
you
just think
think,
that
so you think drug dealers who are selling cocaine and heroin should be murdered because they're contributing to human suffering and death?
if they do it with the intention of actually killing someone, they don't just give someone drugs because they want drugs. They do it actually to murder someone. Then yeah, just like how if you put a knife in an animal's throat or you put a knife in a human's throat, I think you should be. I think it's ethical to murder you. But if you give someone some cocaine and someone overdoses on it and you didn't intend on them like overdosing on it, I don't think you're worthy of death.
Okay, there is an aspect of intent that I agree should be considered in the law. That's why there's a different standard for first degree murder and manslaughter. Like manslaughter, you kill somebody but you didn't intend to. So you got into a bar fight, they hit the floor in a weird way, they die. You didn't intend to kill them, but you're still guilty of murdering them. It's just a lesser charge. So intent does matter. But at the same time, when you're selling something like cocaine and heroin, there's an expectation that a certain amount of people are going to get severely addicted to these drugs. In fact, as a drug dealer, it's in your financial interest to have as many people addicted to these drugs as possible. So you can't argue that, oh, I didn't intend for them to be addicted and have their life get fucked up when no, that's just an inevitable consequence of the industry they live in. And there's just no possible way for a drug dealer to argue against the fact that, oh no, I didn't intend to like ruin their life. And again, there's just going to be an inevitable consequence of a certain amount of people overdosing on these drugs and dying. There's also issues with like needle sharing. You can contract like HIV/AIDS through needle sharing. Like So you can't just say, okay, well, the drug dealer didn't intend to ruin people's lives or kill anyone, when I'm sorry, that's just an inevitable consequence of dealing these hard drugs like cocaine, heroin. Maybe with marijuana, it would be much easier to make that sort of case. But something that's like physiologically addictive, like cocaine, heroin, crystal meth, you could make a very easy case based on your own line of reasoning that drug dealers should be murdered. So do you think that's reasonable?
Well, I don't think that ruining someone's life necessarily, like, makes you worthy of death. I just think actually murdering someone makes you worthy of death and intending to murder someone. And I'm still not quite sure if selling someone some cocaine, um, if that automatically means you have the intent to kill them.
Again, it's just like an inevitable consequence. So you can't really make that argument when you're selling hard drugs that are very easy to overdose on. And if you're selling to like a lot of different people, like again, the expectation is eventually somebody is going to overdose and die on these drugs. And also, a very high percentage of people will ruin their lives taking these drugs. They're going to end up getting severely addicted. So, like you mentioned before, if they're reducing the well-being of humans and animals, or killing humans and animals, they deserve to die. So, under with those standards, according to your line of reasoning, it should be morally acceptable to kill drug dealers, at least those selling hard drugs like cocaine, heroin, crystal meth.
Well, yes, if they have the intent, but I don't think that just an
That
expectation of it
well,
matters,
well,
like,
selling drugs, like just selling the drugs, is an intent. Like that
I
just
wouldn't
proves
consider an
intent right
intent to
off the
kill
bat.
them. How would that be an intent to kill them? They want people to buy their drugs. Why would they want them to be dead?
Okay, well, this was reported on Vice. I did see a documentary where drug dealers are intentionally spiking some of their drugs with fentanyl to make it seem like, okay, the heroin they're selling is really potent, strong, has a high amount of purity. So if somebody dies taking their drugs, it actually increases sales for them because other drug addicts will see, oh shit, that's really good heroin. So there are ways to to prove, okay, well, it is a financial benefit for some amount of people to actually die taking your drugs. uh,
Okay, well,
and and again, like if you're selling something like this, clearly you don't really mind that people are ruining their lives and have a chance of dying taking this shit. So it's hard to just throw away like intent when it's something like drug dealing.
okay, well, if you have the intent, then I do think it's ethical to murder a drug dealer that sells people drugs with the intent of them dying. But if they're just fucking stupid and they don't understand that like people would like die from taking these drugs, I don't think that it's ethical to murder them.
Okay, so as long as somebody actually intends to cause harm, it's okay to kill them?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, if they
so
match my criteria.
okay, so if they intend to cause harm, it's okay to kill them.
Yes, if they match my criteria.
Okay, and explain your criteria again.
If you are able to bring yourself to physically violate a sentient being's basic rights needlessly, at that point, if killing you reduces needless animal and human suffering, it becomes ethical to murder you. And this does not apply to non-moral agents.
So they don't even necessarily have to kill anybody, they could just cause suffering.
No, you have to physically violate it. So you have to physically, well, I mean like rape or murder, like really anything
So
like that,
rapists
I'd
should be
say.
murdered as well.
Yeah.
And you don't believe that there's any chance that a rapist could become rehabilitated.
No, I do. I just think it's ethical to murder them.
Okay, on the level of self-defense, I'd say it is. So if a woman was about to get raped and she had a gun, I think it's perfectly fine for her to protect her well-being by killing the person. But as far as like some sort of governing body, like the government, the police, murdering somebody after they've been proven guilty of being a rapist, I don't see that as ethical.
Well,
but
I
you
don't
do?
necessarily think that that should be what the government does necessarily. I don't know if that'd be good for society as a whole, but with something like slaughterhouse workers and stuff, how look,
Oh,
they're not going to go to prison and killing them would reduce animal and human suffering. I then think it is ethical because they match my criteria and they're not going to go to prison. So like if prison was in the equation for them, I don't like there wouldn't be a need to murder them because they just go to prison.
okay, well, that's strange. You don't want this to be adopted on a policy level, but you do want like some band of thugs running around murdering people you don't like.
If they match my criteria, yes. It's not just people I don't like. It's people who, if killed, would reduce needless animal and human suffering.
Okay, so why wouldn't you want something like this to be adopted by the government?
Well, because there's lots of other factors, like for example, if like a rapist just rapes somebody and then he gets taken in by the law, like then he can't cause any more like suffering and shit. Like, but slaughterhouse workers, they're not gonna go to prison, so killing them, does
Well,
reduce
no,
it. And
the idea here is that you can either choose between having some sort of policy that penalizes people for doing something that's seen as illegal or immoral, or you could choose to have like a gang just run around town murdering people who you don't like slaughterhouse workers. What do you think is more ideal?
more ideal would just be sending them to prison, but that doesn't necessarily mean that killing them wouldn't be ethical.
Okay, I'm still not understanding why you wouldn't prefer to have the government regulate this sort of thing where it would be illegal to run a slaughterhouse, kill animals
Yeah, I do
needlessly.
think that is, but for the time being, it's not. So it's ethically, um,
Do you? Okay, well, again, this is like there's a principled argument here and there's a practical argument, and I think you fail on both fronts. But practically speaking, do you think murdering slaughterhouse workers is a pathway that leads to animal agriculture, slaughterhouses becoming illegal?
I don't think it's the only pathway, but I think it would definitely speed up the progression to that because it would publicize veganism. More people would go vegan.
Okay, is there any other sort of civil rights movement where this sort of thing has worked? Like gay rights, for instance, gays have
Yeah.
wanted to be able to be married. Have gays run around and killed politicians who disagree with their right to marriage? And do you
No,
think that
but
would be effective in having gays have the right to marriage?
well, I think more comparable to the enslavement of animals is the enslavement of black people, and actually black people did, or not necessarily even just black people, but abolitionists did kill people who did support slavery and shit, and that actually
Are
did get
you
publicized.
are you talking about the Civil War?
Yeah, or just like, personal movements like John Brown.
Okay, John. Sorry, I'm not familiar with John Brown. Can you explain?
Well, he basically just he held up a um I think it was like an arsenal of weapons, and he killed some, pro-slavery people with like his
Was it
sons
a
and
white guy?
shit. Yeah, he's a white guy.
Okay.
And yeah, but I don't think I don't know. It's kind of hard.
Okay, that's not the greatest example. You'd actually have to prove that these people going around and murdering slave owners was actually creating a positive cultural change towards abolition of slavery. Like, do you have evidence that murdering slave owners created a positive cultural change towards abolishing slavery?
Well, I know that more people heard about that, and I know that John Brown was idolized after he did kill people like that, so I know for sure it was publicized, and I know for sure that, more people heard about it than if he didn't do that. So, yeah, and I feel like more people did vote for, Abraham Lincoln, who did, which did lead to the Civil War after John Brown, and, just because that sort of thing became more publicized and being an abolitionist became more publicized.
Okay, this is also a bit of a different context. Like, we're talking about enslavement of human beings rather than enslavement of animals. Um, so, again, like, I don't think it's wrong to draw parallels between enslavement of animals and enslavement of human beings. But just given the current culture, do you really think it would be seen as the same thing as someone killing a slave owner, like somebody who owns human slaves? Do you think people would make the same comparison between killing a slave owner and killing somebody who runs a slaughterhouse?
Um, well, I'm not quite sure, but that's not really the point of it. The point of it is that it would publicize veganism and more people would be exposed to veganism, more people would look into veganism, more people would go vegan.
Okay, like again, I just don't understand how that's positive publicity. Again, ISIS committing a suicide bombing. Do you think that's positive publicity for Islam?
No, because I think a lot more people would realize that they're doing something horrible to people who don't deserve death. I think more people would understand that slaughterhouse workers do deserve death. I'm not saying that
Well,
everyone would
again,
agree with it.
again, that's purely subjective. Like they think they're doing something right by killing infidels, people who Allah believes shouldn't be allowed to live, and they're killing people who are basically stopping Islam from progressing. So, like, it's the same sort of like it's terrorism, like is what you're promoting. Again, it might be easier for you to make a case that it's easier to justify killing slaughterhouse workers rather than random people at an airport. But at the same time, you are killing a bunch of random people who might be doing a job that is unethical that you disagree with, but you don't know anything about them, their upbringing, the type of friends and families they have, their goals in life, and whether or not they can even be rehabilitated. Because if they can be rehabilitated, this goes completely against your ethics. Because if they can be rehabilitated, then you'd end up causing overall more suffering and death than if you were to just imprison them and rehabilitate them.
Hmm. Well, I'd say that does make a lot of sense, but I still don't think that I don't really see how that completely reverses the effect of thinking that that's a price willing to pay to reduce animal and human suffering if you're killing someone who, um, or at least I'd think is worthy of death.
Okay, wait, so you're saying that it's worth the risk just because of convenience sake?
No, because it reduces needless animal and human suffering.
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying there is a chance that a lot of these people can be rehabilitated. And like, look, if you actually talk to most of the people who work at these slaughterhouses, they tend to not be terribly intelligent because if they were, they'd be doing something else. The thing is, a lot of these people just aren't terribly intelligent. Slaughterhouse work is a relatively well-paying job, so the only reason they're really doing it is just because they have to for money. If it was their choice, they just wouldn't do it at all. Most people who work at slaughterhouses, they don't like having to kill animals, and a lot of these people get serious psychological problems from doing it. There is the odd person who I've actually met during street activism, where the guy worked in a slaughterhouse. He had to quit because of like some sort of infection, But he said, yeah, like whatever, they're not sentient. Like he genuinely believed animals weren't sentient. Um, there's odd people like that, but the vast majority of them, they don't like doing it. So why would you kill people who don't even like doing that job to begin with?
Well, because I don't think that's a justification for going into it, so I still think they're worthy of death.
Okay, but the point is, most of them probably could be rehabilitated. So that would
Okay.
completely go against your line of reasoning.
Hmm. So do you think it's not ethical to kill Nazis who could be rehabilitated?
Well, you'd have to kind of define Nazi.
Someone who basically, like, works at a concentration camp to
Somebody who works at a concentration camp.
yeah, basically.
So, okay, if this was World War II and you were trying to liberate people from a Jewish concentration camp, I'd say you'd have to do whatever you have to do to liberate those people. So, if that involves killing the workers there at the concentration camp, I think that's morally justified. But if it's within reason, like if they're surrendering, then I'd say you should just like let them live, capture them, and then let them be brought before like a court for war crimes or whatever, and just answer to the crimes they've committed.
Well, then wouldn't killing slaughterhouse workers, like, I know it wouldn't necessarily be, like, needed, but it would, speed up the liberation of animals? Like, don't you think
No,
that should
not at all.
be
Not at all.
it would just
No,
don't think it would speed it up?
no, no civil, no effective civil rights movement in history has ever involved like murder. Blacks getting the right to go to school, vote. They weren't murdering politicians who disagreed with them. Gays getting the right to marry, they weren't murdering politicians who disagreed with them. And especially when you have a movement that's based on reducing suffering and death as much as reasonably possible, it's completely hypocritical to promote a nonviolent movement with violence. It's just completely contradictory to the idea of veganism.
Well, some people say that violence is needed in every movement. I just think violence speeds up every movement, and there's not really any denying that it would publicize veganism if slaughterhouse workers got shot up.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, and suicide bombings publicize Islam.
Yes, but that doesn't reduce needless animal and human suffering, and the
Uh,
people they're killing, I don't find worthy of death.
Look, the idea behind a lot of these terrorist attacks is that they're doing something for the greater good of humanity. You can't just say, I'm right, therefore I get to kill people. It's just not a reasonable position. We live in a free society where you have a right to protest, to argue for free speech. You can't just start murdering people who disagree with you just because you think you're right.
Well,
You may be right. Look, you may be right about what you're saying, but I still think that's a completely nonsense idea that you'd promote a a movement that's based on nonviolence principles, and you use violence to promote nonviolence principles. It's completely hypocritical. And I think you're simplifying things a lot too much. I have a friend who's a hunter, and the reason I'm friends with a hunter is because he's not dishonest. He actually believes in what he's saying. A lot of these hunters, if you actually get into their culture, they actually think they're doing an overall good by hunting, like controlling the wildlife population. A lot of hunters, they're actually the ones who pay money to preserve wildlife habitats. Because if these wildlife habitats are gone, well, they can't hunt. So a lot of these people are actually conservationists. So it's not as simple
Hmm.
as you're making it out to be. You might disagree with a lot of these people on some levels, on some level, but you'd also be surprised how much you agree with them on other levels. So is it reasonable to kill hunters who actually think that they're doing an overall good for wildlife and animals by hunting, controlling their populations, preventing them from like dying out, saving their habitats? Do you think those people deserve to die?
No, because they don't match my criteria. That's not needless. If they
Okay,
absolutely,
well,
if they need to do it to, um, for the environment or whatever, I don't think it's ethical to murder them.
okay, so you're saying it's not okay to murder the vast majority of hunters, but it is okay. It is okay to murder like trophy hunters who just do it for fun.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, you realize this? They're still promoting conservationist efforts. Like when you apply for a hunting license, like the money that you pay for those sorts of things, it goes towards conservation efforts. So you still think those people should be killed just
Well,
because
I
in
don't think that's
principle
what you
they don't
need to
agree?
do.
Sorry?
You're basically putting it as like someone who's killing animals because that's what they need to do to help the environment. I don't think trophy hunters need to do that to help the environment.
No, no, they don't. I'd agree with you. But it's like it's not. My point is, it's not as simple as you're making it out to be. A lot of these people either do believe that they're doing something that's justified, or they are actually on some level committing some type of good, even though on a principled level they might not care or might not agree with you. Like it's still okay to just murder these people just because you disagree with them.
It's not because I disagree with them. It's because
Well, it
I
literally
think
is.
that it's because they're, because in my opinion, that makes them worthy of death if they're physically violating sentient beings' basic rights needlessly.
Okay. So let's say I'm a hunter. I think killing wolves helps control like the wolf population. It prevents them from overpopulating, killing off all these deer. Well, there has to be a better way of controlling wolf populations rather than just shooting them. So you could argue that they're doing it needlessly, even though, like in principle, they might be right. But what they're doing, like they are still needlessly killing. Is it wrong or sorry, is it still acceptable to kill them, even though what they're doing is needless, although you do still agree with them in principle?
If it's needed to reduce the suffering of other animals, then I don't think that it's ethical to kill them. So if it's needed, but if it's needless and really, if it's needless, I do think it's ethical to kill them.
Okay. Um, you know, again, I think you're just going to end up doubling down on all this kind of crazy shit. So I think it's better to just focus on the practical element of this. Um, do you not see it as a problem promoting a non-violent movement like veganism by using violence?
Not when you're killing violent people, and you wouldn't. I wouldn't even be advocating this if the people we would be, or not we, just anyone who's doing what I promote or whatever. They wouldn't be doing this in the first place if the slaughterhouse workers wouldn't be killing these animals needlessly or raping them needlessly or just violating their basic rights.
Oh, okay. So you're saying you didn't really answer my question. So you don't see it as self-contradictory, like hypocritical, to promote nonviolence while using violence to promote your nonviolent message.
No, I don't see how that's contradictory.
You really?
Well, maybe you need to explain it better because I will concede if I realize like that um if I realize that it is contradictory, I will concede, and I think you actually do have pretty good potential to make me concede.
Okay, so let's say if I were to say it's wrong to needlessly to needlessly kill animals, it's wrong to cause needless suffering and death, and then I go out and start murdering slaughterhouse workers when it's very easy to argue that's needless. What you could have done is used your right to protest peacefully. You could work your way up in government. You could lobby. You can do all of these other things to create a strong social and political movement to prevent slaughterhouse workers from like killing animals. So you are promoting needless violence when you do this. You don't see that as hypocritical?
Hmm. Well, actually, when you put it that way, that actually does make a lot of sense. So I think I might want to concede on that, but basically just because like when it reduces animal and human suffering and stuff, and I feel like in a way it I guess you could consider it needless, but at the same time, a part of me wants to say that that's okay because I think they're worthy of death and it
Okay,
reduces animal and human suffering.
um, there are a lot of people I'm sure that you could say are worthy of dying, like they deserve to die, but is it morally acceptable to kill them when you don't have to? Because again, that
Hmm.
completely contradicts your argument that, or like your moral philosophy, that it's wrong to cause needless suffering and death. You could make a very easy argument for plenty of people to be deserving of death or even suffering. Some people deserve to be fucking tortured. Some people deserve to be killed. But when you don't have to, is it morally acceptable to do it? And according to your moral philosophy, it's not. So you're directly contradicting your own moral philosophy when you're arguing that, these people deserve to die, so that means I should be able to kill them, when at the same time you're saying needless suffering and death is wrong. So I see that as self contradictory.
Well, don't you think since they're committing needless suffering and death, it then makes it justified?
No. Um, No, at least not in this situation. So, like again, for something like the Nazis, they're invading other countries, they're rounding up Jews and killing them. The only practical, reasonable way to deal with people like that is by waging war and killing them. Just it's a matter of attrition. Something like slaughterhouse workers. Um, they're not actively going out and trying to kill everything in their path and having everyone bend to their will. Again, we're living in a free society that isn't controlled by Nazis. So you have the ability to protest, you have the ability to lobby in government. Um, you have the ability to use the system in your favor to prevent atrocities like this from happening. So when that's a viable option, you should take it. And,
So
and
do
if you don't take it, that's directly going against your own principles.
Yeah, and I think I understand that, but do you think it's ethical to just if someone has a knife literally to an animal's throat, like they're about to kill the animal, and if you don't shoot them, they'll kill the animal, is it then justified to kill them because it's defense of another, which is sort of relates to self-defense?
Okay, so you're saying if I were just walking down the street and I saw somebody hold a knife to a dog's throat, like they're about to slit the dog's throat, and
Yeah.
I had a gun, like if this was the United States and that was legal, is it ethical to kill the person?
Yeah.
Um, in that circumstance, I'd still say no, because again, you can make sure this person gets arrested, jailed, can be tried in front of like a jury, and there's a possibility that this person can be rehabilitated.
Right, so you don't think it's okay to shoot a person if they have a knife to another person's throat and they're about to kill that person?
Yeah, it is. Um, now,
Wait.
now look, listen. For me personally, I'd probably shoot and kill the person, but on I'd say a policy level, sort of like something I'd promote other people to do. I wouldn't recommend that.
So I don't understand what
Well, look,
about
it's the thing is, it's a very slippery slope. Um, like, would it be okay for me to shoot ants or somebody who's like stepping on ants or insects or worms? Would it be okay for me to shoot him if he's doing that?
well,
Like, at what level do you draw the line?
I'm kinda confused on what level you draw the line because I don't understand what about animals makes it so you shouldn't defend them, but but you should defend humans in the same, circumstance. Like, do you have, like, some sort of trait which makes it okay to, um, defend humans but not animals in a situation like that?
That's kind of weird. Let me think about it. I would say now, listen, I would still say that for both principled and practical reasons, I'd say it's wrong to go to a slaughterhouse and murder slaughterhouse workers because, for one, you have an option of dealing with these people through nonviolent means. Like, we're not being controlled by some sort of Nazi government that's oppressive. You have the right to free speech and protest, and you can lobby for things in government. Um, and just practically speaking, I think it's terrible for the vegan movement to support like murdering people who you disagree with. I think that would make it seem like vegans are fucking crazy, unreasonable. I think that would really harm the movement. So, like on a principled level, it completely goes against our own ethics, and just on a practical level, it's terrible for veganism. Now, for an instance like where you're just walking down the street and you see somebody like torturing a dog, basically it's about to slit its throat, and you have a gun and you have some sort of means of stopping the person. um you know what, I change my opinion a bit. I'd say if there is a way for you to use a weapon, including a gun, in a way where you could just disable the person, I'd say that's ideal. But if you feel the need to, like, if there's a chance that you'd end up killing the person and you're willing to take that risk to save the life of, that dog, I'd say it's reasonable. And similar situation where if you saw like a human being like about to have their throat slit open, if there's a way of dealing with the person in a way where you could just like shoot their arm or leg, incapacitate them, that would be ideal. But if there was a chance where you would have to end up killing the person, like that's reasonable. Right now, just because you put me on the spot like this, I can't really see a reason why it would be unreasonable to do that same thing with a dog. um, yeah, I don't know if there's any like if anybody has like a case law, like something dealing with this in case law. I'd really be interested in seeing that. because I'm sure this has come up in some sort of court before where somebody tried to protect an animal from somebody harming it. Um,
Yeah, I'm
I
pretty
still want to
sure
think about this a little bit. Right now, you just put me on the spot a bit. It's a little hard to, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the law still like I'm pretty sure the law just looks at it like you just shot someone if you shoot someone on behalf of a dog because I'm pretty sure they don't have like rights to the point where they think it's okay for you to defend them. But I do agree. I think that that it is ethical to shoot someone if they are about
Um,
to kill them.
so I do know for sure that animals fall under property law, and at least in some parts of the United States, you would be legally justified to shoot and or kill the person if they're trying to kill your dog. If it's your own dog, I'm not so sure if you would be covered legally if it's somebody else's dog or if it's like a stray. I'm not certain. I'm sure like courts would be sort of lenient towards you because like especially in the United States, like people are obsessed with dogs. So if somebody like, you know, if a jury saw, okay, well, he killed a person, but this person was like being like horribly abusing this dog and they're about to slit its throat, I'm sure they'd at least be lenient towards you. But on like a principled ethical level, like not even a legal level, right now, I can't really think of a way why it would be unreasonable for you to risk injuring or even killing a human being to save the dog's life. So
Hmm.
now I would draw a line at something like an insect or a worm, just because the ability for a human to experience well-being is so far above that of an insect where okay if somebody's stepping on a cockroach it's unreasonable to like just shoot and kill them and like again I'm sure like somebody could be rehabilitated to you know have a greater level of respect for animals.
Yeah. So let's say you walk into a slaughterhouse, someone has a knife to a pig's throat, basically the same situation with the dog, except for you just go into a slaughterhouse for whatever reason. Is it then ethical to shoot that slaughterhouse worker?
No, again for like principled and practical reasons. um I think a lot of people, not just vegans, if they saw that happening to a dog, they definitely step in and risk harming and even killing a human being. I think there was actually a case that happened in China where, like, you know, a lot of people do keep dogs as pets in China, and there are people who steal like dogs from their homes to sell on a meat market. One of these assholes got caught, and I think he was beaten to death. So
Damn.
I don't. So again, just from because it's an isolated incident that isn't politically motivated, it's a different sort of thing where I think an average person would sort of be on your side, so it wouldn't really harm the vegan movement. I think like if a vegan just happened to be there with a gun and he shot a person, like I think a lot of meat eaters would do that too. Um, and again, it's not really for political reasons that you're even doing that. Now, if you were to go into a slaughterhouse, that definitely is political. And if you start killing slaughterhouse workers, that literally fits the definition of terrorism. And again, for a principled reason, you're like you're trying to promote a an ethical lifestyle, like a moral philosophy that goes against killing or at least killing needlessly. And you're killing these people needlessly when there are other nonviolent means of action to prevent these people from doing what they're doing. And again, on a like practical level, I think it's really harmful to the vegan movement if you were to go into a slaughterhouse, start shooting people, and people saw in the news vegans are murderers. Like it would be terrible for the movement.
So would it be ethical if a vegan, let's say, had like a taser or something and just decapacitated all of the slaughterhouse workers?
You mean incapacitated?
Or or yeah, sorry.
Um, no. I'd still be against that. Again, that would still fit the definition of terrorism. And there's none like that would still be violent, much less violent than shooting them to death, but that still would be violent. I'm sure, like, again, it would be easier to justify that sort of thing, but I still see that as going against the ethical philosophy of veganism, where if there are nonviolent means to deal with something, then you should take that route. And again, just practically speaking, if people saw in the news, vegans are like incapacitating people through whatever means, taser, knockout gas, whatever, just because people are doing things that they disagree with, that still wouldn't be good for the vegan movement. And like, again, still on a principled level, like, again, it's very easy to argue for veganism, but just on a principled level there, where you are committing acts of terrorism, even if they are relatively nonviolent, you're still committing acts of terrorism in a free country. Like, if this was any other political movement, like, say, Islam, do you think it's reasonable for Islamists to go into Christian churches, incapacitate everybody, drag them outside, and then break down their church because they disagree with them?
Hmm.
Like, again, veganism is a lot easier to argue for than Islam, but it's the same sort of thing. Like, everyone has different moral values, and on some level this is like it's always going to be subjective. It's easier to argue for veganism, but it's the same sort of thing. I just don't see that as reasonable in a free society to take away like somebody's individual rights and freedoms just because you disagree with them, even if it's very easy to argue for your moral position.
Hmm. And I think I do kind of want to concede on that because I do understand that it is needless. But um yeah, I didn't really think of it like being needless. I kind of just thought of it as it just speeds up the movement, and if it reduces animal and human suffering, and if killing slaughterhouse workers is the price to pay, um I don't know. I guess that's
You'd
what I use
Okay,
to justify it.
so, like, you're talking about speeding up the movement. You'd you're gonna have a really hard time arguing that this would speed up the movement. I'd say it would slow it down or completely destroy it, worst case scenario. Again, if we were Muslims rather than vegan and we were trying to support Islam, would going into Christian churches, tasering everybody or using knockout gas so they're unconscious, tying them up, dragging them outside, and then breaking down their church, would that promote Islam? So if that wouldn't help promote Islam, how the hell would that help promote veganism?
Well, because veganism would catch on quicker, and as people look into veganism, like
Well,
as
no,
seeing news stories like this.
you're not showing how that would actually make veganism catch on quicker. If that wouldn't help Islam catch on quicker, how would it help veganism catch on quicker?
Well, I think if you just take a random like amount of people, you expose one to some, Islam, the principles of Islam, and then you um show them those same people the principles of veganism, more of them will be vegan than part of Islam.
Um, that's probably just because veganism is an easier philosophy to argue for. But again, like, I don't see how that's a more effective strategy for activism than me making videos on my YouTube channel or lobbying in government to ban fur, which is happening in California right now, by the way. Um, how is like, don't you think if your goal is to reduce animal suffering, um, don't you think, like, having protests outside of Canada Goose stores, those terrible coats where there's fur on them and they're
Yeah.
stuffed with duck and chicken feathers. Do you think it's a better strategy to protest in front of their stores or during any of their events and trying to lobby in government to get those like these sorts of garments banned? Or do you think it's a more effective means of activism to break down their stores, steal everything, burn it?
Um, well, whichever one would really get to more people, I think would be more effective. Whichever one would get more people talking about it, I think would be more effective. And the reason why I was using publicizing veganism as a justification for doing it is because if you go outside a slaughterhouse protest, no one's going to hear about it. If you walk into a slaughterhouse, shoot a bunch of slaughterhouse workers, a lot of people are going to hear about it. A lot more people are going to be exposed to
Uh,
veganism.
no, no, people do hear about it. Look, Anita Krines, the leader of the Toronto Pig Save, she's been in the news quite a lot, and especially recently because she was in a court trial where she was being fined for like criminal mischief for giving pigs water. Just normal, non-violent means of activism do get publicized. Um, uh, I was in a protest at the Royal Winter Fair where they were auctioning off dairy cows. That made it onto the Toronto Star. The protest in front of that restaurant Antler in Toronto, that was widely publicized all across the world. You're not actually giving like a compelling case that using violence is a more effective means of getting publicized. And like you also have to make the case, okay, well, when violent means of activism get publicized, it's more effective than when non-violent means of activism get publicized.
Well, don't you think that even if protesting got you on the news, that if you shot up slaughterhouse workers, that would make basically more news headlines and that would reach more people than just protesting, even if you were on the news?
It let's say it would. Why is that? Why is the overall net effect more positive than if you were using nonviolent means of activism and it got publicized on the news? So let's say you're Anita Krines, you lead the Toronto Pig Save. Let's say 500,000 people hear about this news story that you're being charged with criminal mischief for giving pigs water. Um, so let's say you shoot up a slaughterhouse. 1 million people, twice as many people, see the news story. Why is it better when 1 million people see a news story where a vegan shoots up and murders a bunch of people compared to 500,000 people seeing a news story where a vegan is being charged criminally for giving pigs water when the people who are literally murdering these animals and abusing them, they're not being charged with anything? Don't you think that news story is a little bit better? It makes people be a lot more sympathetic to vegans and much more willing to say, "Oh, wow, that's really fucked up. I never thought of that. Like vegans are like just giving pigs water, being nice to animals, and they're getting criminally charged, but the people who are abusing and killing animals, they're like nothing happens to them." You think that's less effective, like a less overall good outcome than if you were to shoot up a slaughterhouse and it got publicized.
Well, I think just because of just the bigger the bigger audience of it, I do think more people would go vegan because of that than because of just a story like that. Not because I think that's a compelling case for people to go vegan. I just think more people would see it, more people would look into veganism than just a certain amount of people seeing that saying, "Oh, that's bullshit," and then, a few people going vegan because of that, because really the people who think it's bullshit would basically all be vegan
Well, what would make them go vegan if they saw you shoot up a slaughterhouse?
because they'd probably look into they'd probably just look into veganism more, and they'd look into what actually happens at a slaughterhouse and
Why?
just stuff. Well, I think just because it would probably spark their interest in it.
Why?
Um, I just think that if they see like something like that was going on, I think that that probably would make them want to check it out. Like I don't really have like a detailed reason why someone would be like, "Oh, someone shot up a slaughterhouse, like let me look into veganism," but maybe they'd look into it to see if maybe other vegans are that radical or just stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I'd see that creating a cultural shift where vegans are seen as crazy fucking nut jobs who are willing to murder other people who disagree with them, like essentially terrorists. Vegans would just end up being seen as terrorists if shit like that happened. And if enough, if that happened frequently enough, they'd be recognized as a terrorist organization, veganism.
Hmm.
So, like, no, I totally disagree with you. And I don't think you've given a compelling argument for why a news story where a vegan shoots up a slaughterhouse would end up turning more people vegan than a news story like about Anita Krines, head of the Toronto Pig Save, being criminally charged for giving pigs water. So, altogether, like, I think you're kind of starting to be in agreement with me that, in principle, it's wrong to murder slaughterhouse workers, just because it totally goes against your ethical principles. Because, for one thing, there are nonviolent means for you to deal with these people, and if you agree that, unnecessary violence is wrong, then you'd have to see that as unnecessary violence because there are nonviolent means for you to deal with these people. And again, like a lot of these people could very well be rehabilitated, so that would further go against your own moral standards. The only thing now is just you still kind of seem to be on the fence about the practical aspect of things, where you're trying to suggest that murdering slaughterhouse workers would accelerate the vegan movement. I don't even see why that would matter. If you agree that in principle this is totally wrong and it goes against your ethical beliefs, why would it even matter that it would accelerate the vegan movement if it goes against your ethical principles?
Yeah, I think that's true.
Okay.
That kind
So,
of makes me concede on it.
so do you want to wrap this debate up? Do you have any like final thoughts of your own?
Well, I just have some unrelated questions to you if you want
Sure,
to. So I want you to explain, like, basically in depth your views on abortion and why you
sure.
think, and I am pro-choice, just putting that out there, but because I don't think I haven't really seen you explain it much.
Yeah, sure. So, from a practical perspective, abortions positively benefit society. The less unwanted children there are, the better. As soon as abortions became legalized, crime fell massively in the United States. Everywhere else in the world, once like people started practicing abortions, literacy rates went way up. Just the economy benefited when like people who don't want children make the worst fucking parents. So, like, yeah, if you don't want criminal, delinquent, abused, neglected children running around on the streets, either winding up in prison or joining the military and being killed, then abortions are a great thing for society. Secondly, I don't think a fetus is a living thing. I don't like they're at least not sentient. They're just a collection of cells. So I don't see anything ethically wrong with destroying a fetus. You could make an argument that there is a point in which like a fetus becomes like more of a fully formed baby where it develops sentience, and at that point it would be morally wrong to kill the fetus. Personally, I have such a strong bias against children. I literally would not care personally whether or not people aborted a baby like the day before it was supposed to be born. But I think to be as morally consistent as possible, I'd say we'd have to look at a point in time where a fetus does actually gain consciousness, and at that point, you could say it's like you can't abort the baby. Or you could go down the other route where you can pick a point in time where a baby would be viable outside the mother's womb. So, what I think the earliest, like, yeah, the earliest pregnancy was like 6 months or something. Like, you could set a limit at 6 months for abortion. So yeah, that's my reason why I think abortions are perfectly fine.
Hmm.
They benefit society. I don't see anything morally wrong with destroying a fetus since it's not conscious. And just in terms of like more detailed regulation, I think you could just make a case for banning abortions after a certain term where either the fetus becomes sentient or it becomes like viable so it can live outside the mother.
Okay, so what would so you watched my video that was titled "Questions for Ask Yourself," right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
You brought up people in a coma.
yeah.
Well,
So why?
so so for those of you who didn't watch the video, you asked, or you said like, okay, well, there are people in a coma who aren't sentient, but if you knew they could wake up eventually, would it be wrong to pull the plug and kill them while they're in a coma when you know eventually they would become sentient? So the parallel there is if you know a fetus would eventually become sentient if it went to term, then wouldn't that make it that like just as morally wrong as pulling the plug on somebody who is in a coma? You know, uh, now people in a coma are sentient, so there is a problem there. It's just that they're not conscious, like as in awake. There are different definitions for consciousness. But like if I'm sleeping, I'm still a conscious creature, but I'm not conscious as in awake. So yeah, you are sentient throughout the entire period you're in a coma. Now, if there was an absolute guarantee that eventually you would wake up out of the coma, it would be immoral to kill you in most circumstances. So, like, my grandfather had a heart attack and he was severely brain damaged. And there was a chance that he would wake up out of the coma he was in, but he'd be severely mentally disabled. And like, my entire family knew he wouldn't want to live the rest of his life like that. So we just pulled the plug on him. In a situation like that, I think it's perfectly fine to pull the plug on somebody who's in a coma. If there's a really high chance they'd be brain damaged, and you know for a fact that they wouldn't want to live that way. Now, basically, this is just a problem with potential. If you're going to argue that potential makes it wrong to like murder a fetus, then like you could just say it's wrong to masturbate because you're wasting sperm that could potentially become a human being, and that human could live a great, wonderful life. So it's wrong to never have children because you're wasting the potential of a possible life. So I just don't see that as a valid argument.
Hmm. Yeah. And another question, um, basically health wise, what is worse for your health, red meat or oil?
Red meat. Like oil is bad because especially oils that are processed at high heat, they can contain trans fat. Also, they tend to be high in omega-6, which especially if you have a certain gene which makes you hypermetabolize these plant-based oils, you can develop an abundance of arachidonic acid, which is inflammatory, and that can promote heart disease. Now, the highest dietary source of arachidonic acid is meat, so you kind of have the same negative benefit there between consuming oils and consuming meat. Also, there's other like negative effects to your cholesterol profile and inflammatory markers, like like red meat contains saturated fat and cholesterol. They're both inflammatory. They both raise your serum cholesterol score. That's the main risk factor for heart disease. Red meat, especially, it's high in heme iron. Heme iron is a pro-oxidant. So not only will it raise your serum cholesterol, but it will also cause oxidative changes to your serum cholesterol, which further accelerates heart disease. And again, it also contains arachidonic acid, which is the same problem you get from consuming a lot of plant oils.
Hmm. Okay. And one more question. Is it immoral to buy organic, basically produce, kind of like if you're familiar with what Avi or
Yeah,
Avi or however you say his
I've
name?
seen his stuff. So
Yeah.
Avi, I've mentioned him on my channel before. He's a plant-based doctor. He's arguing that organic food actually isn't vegan because you're using things like manure and bone meal and blood for the fertilizer. So if you're using all of these animal products and the fertilizer when you could use conventional farming methods that either don't have any manure or bone meal or blood in it or have much less, then that's obviously the more ethical alternative. Um, I wouldn't really go that far to claim that organic farming isn't vegan because I'm not convinced you're actually supporting animal suffering and death by using organic farming. Now, I would consider it a valid argument that conventional farming is safer and healthier and likely less environmentally damaging than organic farming. But I wouldn't go as far as saying it's not vegan, just because, again, like these farming methods kind of overlap quite a bit. So you're kind of drawing too much of a arbitrary line between the two.
Hmm. All right, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay,
I
so
just
that's
wanted to clear that up because like I'm pretty sure Gardein uses organic shit, and I was like, whoa, like, am I not vegan for buying like Gardein? Or
mhm, right. Yeah,
yeah,
like again, I wouldn't draw an arbitrary line because, like, again, these farming methods and everything they overlap, and I'm not convinced that you're directly supporting animal agriculture by using organic farming, just because they tend to use more manure, blood, bone meal than conventional. But I would like there is an argument to be had that if you can avoid organic, then that's ideal.
yeah,
Yeah, so I'd wrap up this debate just by saying that your argument completely fails in principle. It directly goes against the ethical principles of veganism to kill slaughterhouse workers because, for one, there are non-violent means for you to deal with slaughterhouse workers, and veganism is about non-violence. So if you can choose a non-violent means to deal with these people, then that's obviously the means you should choose. And also, there's a very good chance that a lot of these slaughterhouse workers could be rehabilitated into like eventually taking your side and agreeing with you. So again, that it's just immoral in principle. And just on a practical level, I think it also completely fails. I don't think vegans murdering people who disagree with them would actually help to promote veganism. I think that would just make people think veganism is terrorism, and that would either severely slow down the vegan movement or just destroy it entirely.
hmm. Yeah, and I want to end it with saying, I definitely do have a different perspective than when I came in here, and I do concede that it's needless. So yeah, I would say that it goes against my ethical beliefs.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'm glad that you at least, I don't have to call the police on you because I don't have to be worried you're going to go out and murder a bunch of people. So that's good.
Yeah.
But thanks for, coming on the channel, having the debate. And
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'll leave a link to your channel in the description down below. So you can just, I think I have two super chats that I want to respond to. So you can just leave now and exit the Hangout if you want.
Okay,
Uh,
thanks. See
yeah,
ya.
thanks. See ya. Okay, so Bazaboo donated $5. He asks, Richard, let me see you dab. Okay. Dab. Dab on them haters. Okay, so I hope that was a decent dab for you. And thanks for the donation, Bazaboo. Uh, Jetacat94 donated 10 euros. He asks, which adversary would terrify you most to face in a cage match? Captain James T. Kirk with his double fist punches, B. Knight Rider and brutal hip throws, or C. Roaming millennial rocking Team Enzyme pajamas. Hmm. Let's see. I guess maybe Knight Rider. Like I'm assuming David Hasselhoff is probably the best fighter out of all of them. Maybe like if I'm remembering correctly, I think he might have done wrestling before. So yeah, maybe David Hasselhoff. Brutal hip throws. Yeah, like he did do dancing and shit. But yeah, probably just David Hasselhoff as Knight Rider. I think he'd be the most physically challenging opponent that I could face. Then I guess next would be Roaming Millennial in her Team Enzyme pajamas. Just because, not because she's more of a physical threat than James T. Kirk, but just because like her appearance and everything about her absolutely disgusts me and makes me cringe. So that would probably be a bit more frightening. And then I guess at the very end, Captain James Kirk. So yeah, that's. Hope that answer satisfied you. But thanks for the big donation, Jetty Cat. I really appreciate it. So that looks like, yeah, that looks like it's it for the super chats. Thanks for checking out the debate, everybody. This video will be uploaded to my main channel later if you want to check it out. So that'll just take a few hours. But again, thanks for watching the debate, and I will have some more gaming content on my gaming channel soon. So be sure to subscribe to Vegan Gains Live. I am planning on streaming some more Spider-Man in the very near future. So thanks, everybody, and hope you have a good day.